It's fun. You guys are definitely my guinea pig audience. I've never done this talk before, but I figure if it's, talking about myself, that should be easy. So, and like I was just saying, hindsight is 20/20. So in your career, you get to look back at all the amazing choices you made, or sort of accidental things that happened to you, and what you learned along the way. So although it's a story about my journey, it's also I think there's some key points in there that I think could be helpful to you as you're sort of navigating your career. So have folks read the Sheryl Sandberg book, Lean In, heard about the jungle gym thing? Okay, cool. So I just thought I would steal that idea. I don't feel like I was ever someone that had like my 5-year plan or my career ladder planned out, and in fact, in school I didn't even think I would end up in the industry, so it's sort of ironic that I've been in the industry for 18 years, so, so you never know. So let me start out a little bit by talking about what does a senior director of engineering do. I liken it to herding cats sometimes. I like this Farsighted cartoon where a cat herder would rather be developing a large software project instead. So, so if I talk a little bit about kind of what I do today, my charter essentially is to build the core capabilities of Box, but also express those capabilities as a platform for people through APIs and SDKs, and then really help organize and support that ecosystem of developers who want to build on Box. So whether that's documentation or sample code, or figuring out how, what to present at an event, or how to do technical outreach, and working with marketing teams. There's sort of a wide array of code building for the internal applications as well as for external developers, which is kind of cool. So my team, I have 3 managers under me and 4 technical leads. We're basically sort of managers in training. They do about 6 months as tech leads, and then decide whether they want to get into the management track or not. Total of about 40 engineers, which is about 8 Scrum teams, so we practice Agile at Box. And I also work with about 10 product managers, which is pretty high for the number of engineers that I have. There are some teams that don't have product managers at all. It might be a little unusual for the industry. Usually every team has a product manager. And then I also have program managers. So a little bit later I'll talk about what the difference is between product manager, program manager, product marketing, engineering manager, and kind of how those fit together. And then also on top of my day job of doing engineering stuff, I also am involved in initiatives like starting mentoring programs, or thinking about the organizational health of all of engineering, or working with our women in tech group. So a lot of different activities that are initiatives, things I'm passionate about, besides just the technical projects that I work on. Cool. So how did I get here? It was not a straight path. So just a little bit, sort of the short summary. So basically, I started as an engineer in 1996 at Macromedia. I was actually an intern at Macromedia before I went back full-time. Macromedia was later acquired by Adobe in 2006. So my whole span of time at Macromedia Adobe was 17 years, which is really unusual for the industry. Most people are about maybe 4 years on average right now, and probably less with the people who are coming out of college now. I worked on the opportunity to work on 2 1.0 projects, which were really, it was an accident that I ended up on both of those, but a super awesome experience. So both Dreamweaver 1.0 and Flex 1.0. I went into engineering management. I was a programmer for a while. Went into engineering management in about 2002 when I joined the Flex Builder team. And later I had a brief stint in product management. So I took what I knew from Flex and applied it to figuring out, well, what's the roadmap that we want to build? How would we engage with enterprise partners and customers, and think about how to be a good enterprise product. So I kept my technical knowledge and learned a little bit more about the business side as a product manager. Then totally randomly, Adobe unfortunately had a series of layoffs, and a week before I went on maternity leave, they laid off my whole product management team that I had been working with, and I had 5 days to come up with a new charter for a new team, and then I went on maternity leave for 6 months and came back to see how it went, which was interesting. So when I came back, we really did start the charter in earnest, and so it was a very weird role. Essentially, it was called strategic engagements, but we were within business development, working with a pre-1.0 product around video, and a customer, which was NBC Sports, and together we built an application for the Olympics, which was really cool, and that was basketball. But it was a completely random, like there is no job description like that anywhere. We just made it up as we went, which was fun. And so then I started at Box a year and a half ago, and have been there working on the platform ever since. So that's the short part of the story. But let me dig into it a little bit. So internships, they were pretty key for me in sort of figuring out what the industry was like. I really got into computer science totally accidentally. I went to Brown because I wanted to study languages, like French and Spanish, not C++ and Java. But I ended up in programming languages instead. So I didn't really start computer science till I was a sophomore, and then I did finish a Bachelor of Science in 3 years, which was a little tough and I missed some key classes that I really wish I had taken. Ironically, I never took a database class, even though I now work at Fox, which has very large data source. So, so that was kind of fun. I keep thinking about going back to school for that, but anyway, it works out. So while I was there, I really thought, okay, this is fun, it's problem solving, I love it, but I don't want to go work in a dark room and not talk to people all day and just code my life away. That's not for me. So it was sort of funny that I ended up doing an internship doing QA at a company that kind of proved to me that the industry sucked. And thank goodness I decided to do a second internship because the second one was much better. The first one, it wasn't because it was QA, but it was because I literally had a desk that faced the wall and no one talked to me all day, and I spent all day writing test plans I wasn't sure anybody was ever going to run, and it was just horribly boring. A bad example of what an internship is. The second one was at Macromedia, and I think the very first thing that I learned was don't be afraid to ask for what you want. You can't sit around waiting for someone to say, I have an awesome opportunity for you, you should come do it. Like occasionally that happens, that's fantastic, but it doesn't always happen that way. So when I went into my professor's office, he'd given me a list of companies out here in California. I wanted to come try a company. He gave me a list of companies like Macromedia, what do they do? And he said, oh, well, they build all this software for building DVDs and CDs and things like that. This is how old I was. Some real cool products that were around multimedia. And I thought, oh, that's pretty cool. There's like the art side and there's the computer science side. This could be kind of neat. And I got on he basically said, come into my office, and he called up the director of engineering at Macromedia. He goes, Norm, how come you haven't called Heidi back? She's right here, hold on. You want to talk to her? And he puts me on the phone. And so proceeds directly into an interview. Like my professor's listening, there's this director of engineering, and like, and so he starts trying to figure out, like, what do I want, what am I good at? And he's like, how about a role in QA? And I'm like, actually, no. Do you have anything else? And it was really gutsy, I think, to say, no, I've done that already, and I kind of hated it. And so, do you have anything else? I'd like to get a better picture of it. And so that's why there's here, which was just that phone interview and sort of having the guts to say, actually, I don't want to do that. I'd like something different. Is there something more interesting for me? And he ended up coming up with a really cool role where I got to write sample code and documentation, work with a documentation team, and build this sample code for third-party developers to build on top of, build plugins for the Macromedia products. So it ended up being really cool. I loved the culture at the company and the people I met. I definitely have some lifelong friends from that internship, and especially since I came back. So it really cemented for me what a software company could be like. It was fun, it was dynamic, there were these artists and musicians and people having fun coding, but it was a lot around the collaboration and the culture. And so that for me really opened my eyes, and that's kind of how I accidentally ended up in the industry. So talking about career choices along the way, this is the part where I reflect back on how clever it was of me to have made some of these choices. But really at the time, I don't think I knew a lot. Maybe I just was following my gut about things. But the very first one was I was working. I went back to work on this studios team. It's called Macromedia Open Architecture, and it was all about plugins and helping plugin developers write plugins for the products like Director and all of these products that barely exist anymore. And my boss at the time, actually super ironic, so I started in April of '96, and 3 months later they hired a guy, his name was Kevin Lynch, and he became the CTO of Adobe, and it was recently on stage with the iWatch, if you guys saw that, which was really cool to see how his career has progressed, but he also stayed at Adobe exactly 17 years and left about 3 months after I did. But anyway, he was my boss at the time, and he had this idea of, we were working on these studios thing, and it wasn't really clear what the business plan was, but he had this idea that we should make it easier for people to develop web pages. The internet was going to be a big thing, and everyone should be able to do HTML, but the big problem was that every HTML editor screwed up your code. So what if we could build a tool where you could do WYSIWYG development of HTML pages, but not screw up your code? And that's where he came up with the idea for Dreamweaver. And I basically listened to him talk about the business prospects of where Dreamweaver was going, and the business prospects of people talking about the studios as shovelware. That was a way to charge people more money and give products they don't want to go along with the flagship product that's in the box. And so listening to him about that, that became a theme for me later, really thinking about what's the business value of the thing I'm going to work on? That ended up being important to me. Is this something that's going to be successful? It can be technically interesting, but nobody will ever sell it or use it, and that's not as fun as being on something that actually has a real chance in the business. So it turned out that he really was amazing at creating the vision for this thing, and it turned into a runaway success after that. It really was, at the time, a revolutionary product for people who were web developers. So that was, I'm glad I listened to him so carefully about that. So the next big step that I made along the way was going from an engineering role to being a team lead. So it was this concept that our engineering manager on Dreamweaver had, I don't know, something like 15 direct reports or 18 direct reports. It was just a huge team. There was no way that he could keep track of all the things that were going on. So he decided to have 3 team leads, and they would each work with a subset of engineers on their projects, and we would keep in touch with what was going on, identify risks and stuff like that. And so he asked me to be a team lead, and this was one, I feel like the big takeaway was follow your strengths. I really kept getting into all the conversations about what are we building and why are we doing that, and I don't think these teams are working together, and I started sort of being nosy and kind of trying to lead things a little bit. And so I think that was when I realized that one of my strengths is leadership, and that I should follow that. And I think that is a big takeaway in your career is to follow your strengths. There's a lot of talk about, make sure you develop your weaknesses and get rid of your weaknesses. But the more important thing and the more fulfilling thing is if you follow your strengths, you'll actually have a lot more fun and feel less frustrated about what you're trying to do. So the next step after that, I'd been on Dreamweaver for about 7 years, and I was a team lead still. It wasn't evident that my manager was ever really going to go anywhere. I ended up switching over to a new product, and again, the vision for it was a little fuzzier about what the business value was, but I kind of got it, and it kind of made sense. But the bigger, more enticing thing was that it was a management role, and the interesting thing was that it was going to be building the product on the same Dreamweaver code base. We were going to take the Dreamweaver code base and add this other layer and build this sort of separate product about it. And so that to me was sort of a nice example of kind of taking a risk, a little bit of a leap of faith, but having a little bit of grounding that at least I understood Dreamweaver and knew how it worked. And so I had an idea of how you would build something on top of it. So that was one where it was kind of a risk to go to a brand new team, brand new set of people. But at least I could take advantage of my leadership skills and see how management went, but also sort of keep a foot on the ground with the technology. So a couple years later, Flex Builder was going on. It was fine, and I think we shipped Flex Builder to, I don't even remember, but there were basically, at one point I decided that I wasn't really sure where things were going at Adobe, and I thought I would look around, and a friend of mine convinced me to go interview at Google. And I interviewed and actually did get an offer, and I was this close to accepting it. And I just did a lot of soul searching about what was important to me at the time. My daughter was 1 year old, and I had been working in the city, living in the city, everything was very close and local. And Google, although they were trying to open a San Francisco office and I was going to be able to help with that, they had pretty strict requirements about everybody coming down to the main campus quite often. And so that would have meant a commute. It would have meant, ramping up on a brand new technology, building a team from scratch, just a huge set of responsibilities. And I was looking at the things that I was doing. It wasn't like they were completely challenging and new, but there were some opportunities about what I was doing. But it was fairly comfortable. I had a good job. I liked what I was doing, and I could see some path to new, interesting challenges. And at Google, I was looking at that as, oh my gosh, that's going to be 12 to 14-hour days, and I'm going to have to super prove myself, and I have a 1-year-old, and I'm not sure how much time I really want to spend on that. So that to me was basically just really assessing my life priorities and realizing that I was not in a position to go to a company that required that much of me at that time, and so I ended up staying at Adobe. The cool thing was that they also agreed to help me. I said, listen, I'm bored, I want something new to do, and so they offered some cool opportunities like going to, it was Stanford Executive Institute, so basically like a mini MBA in 12 days that you go onto the Stanford campus and stay there as a student for 12 days and have a really intense course that goes through a lot of the same topics as an MBA, because I said I wanted to learn more about the business side of things. So that was actually pretty cool, but again, like the key thing there was, assess your life priorities, like how important is it for you to be taking a big risk and a big leap of faith and working extra hours, and can you do that and be happy and comfortable with it versus maybe now it's not the right time. So I stayed at Adobe, and at some point, so this was another, Adobe had a background of a couple years of layoffs. So there was a point where they said, listen, we're going to offshore most of the Flex Builder development. And so I was involved in taking my team from 11 people down to 5 people in the US, and then 6 of those people would move on to new roles. Interestingly, as I was doing all of that, it turns out they also had plans for me, and they said, we don't want you in engineering management anymore, we want you to go over and be, we're going to start a new product management role for you instead. So I basically got reassigned to something brand new, and at first I was really mad, because I was thinking, no, I've been investing in being an engineering manager and a senior engineering manager and being a director at some point, and I was really mad that they were going to cut that off, because I finally had a plan and it cut me off. But it turned out that I talked with some people, and again, they said, listen, you've got some interesting strengths here, you said you wanted to go into the business side of things a little bit, here's an opportunity to, again, keep one foot grounded, you know the Flex product line, you know the customers that we're trying to target, go try the business side, go see what product management is like, and build a team over there, and figure out your charter, and that was definitely a big thing for me, embracing change. Even if change happens to you, I naturally have positivity as one of my other strengths. I can find the silver lining in pretty much anything, and even though I had a month of super grumpiness, I did talk with enough people that get me to figure out, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, my choices are to quit or to go figure out how to make the best of it. And so I went and made the best of it, and it was awesome. I got to work with some business development people who really could understand how to assess whether a partner had a good business model that would match our business model, and was there a power dynamic that was unhealthy, or did we have similar goals? And they really made me think about the industry and the market in a very different way, and I wouldn't have had the opportunity if I just stayed in engineering management. So product management was super cool. Working with partners was very enlightening to see how other companies are run. I mean, having been at Adobe this long, I really didn't see how other companies were run, so this was a cool opportunity to see that. And so, yeah, embracing change, and if you are going to take a big risk, keeping one foot grounded is a great way. If you are risk averse, it's a great way to sort of jump into risk and be not totally floating in the air. So after that, the strategic engagements, I guess the thing there was try something totally different. I don't know, that one was just so weird. I almost, it's so bizarre to even explain why that's even on my resume. I did that for, let's see, I went back from my maternity leave in May, and then I stayed, it was probably 8 months or 10 months total before I left and went to Box. And it was, again, a super interesting experience working with NBC Sports and working with a 1.0 product and helping them refine what are you building, who's the target customer, how are you going to talk about it, and then does it actually work for a customer. And so working with NBC Sports and building a global ad for the Olympics was super cool. I learned a ton about streaming video and about what the heck it takes to actually produce sporting shows, which is insane that anybody does that as a career. It's way more work than anything I've ever seen before. So it was really neat. I don't know, I feel like, who knows, there's going to be something in the future that I will pull out of that toolbox of stuff that I did for NBC that I will realize I've learned, and that I don't know now what that was. Maybe it was about how to talk to someone who's a vice president at another company. What does it take to actually be that level of professionalism? Maybe it was about how to say no when they ask you to, be 24 hours on call with a team of 3 people for 3 weeks. How do you say no? How do you set limits? I mean, who knows? I'm sure I learned a ton there, and it probably comes out over time. But again, it is fun to try something totally different. All right, and then the last one. So going from Adobe to Box, people often ask, well, okay, 17 years at Adobe, why did you finally decide to leave? And I sort of joke about, well, if I didn't leave, I was probably going to die there because it was a lifetime. So for me, it was, I was really looking for an opportunity to apply what I knew, and it is kind of neat when you do a big shift. You don't realize what you know until you have to apply it somewhere else. And so for me, that was a super fun opportunity. And I think I was very selective. I only interviewed at one place, and I was pretty sure if I interviewed that if they offered it, I would accept it because I didn't want to go into it lightly. So I thought about it a lot before I even interviewed, which was that it was an enterprise company that I thought had amazing prospects of winning in their industry, and it was just a hard problem to solve. And if they had the guts to go solve it, then I wanted to go be there and be along for the ride. And of course, I come from a background in desktop software. How did I possibly get into a cloud company that's massive data storage, content storage? So it's definitely been interesting. And again, thinking of okay, well, I know how to do engineering management inside and out. That part's easy. Now I just have to go learn the technology and the market. And it's been an interesting journey for sure. All right, so I've thrown out a lot of titles of different people that I've worked with, and this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but I know, have folks interned, by the way, at companies? Nobody's interned? Okay, cool. Perfect for this then. So I know when I was thinking about engineering in the industry, I only thought of like the person who writes the code and not much else about how a company is structured. So even in engineering, there's a ton of specialization, and I feel like that's what's the coolest thing about computer science is that now you can pretty much apply it to anything you're interested in, right? And so even if you're in a software company or not in a software company and you're some other discipline, there's still programming involved of some sort, and it's a really cool way to make an impact pretty much in anything that you're interested in. But within a typical software company, there's even specializations like working on the user interface or working on performance and thinking about security, thinking about back-end infrastructure. You can be more generalized and be a full-stack programmer, someone who builds the back-end infrastructure and the middle-tier business logic and the UI. You could be doing mobile, you could be doing web. I mean, there's really so many different specializations within this, and it's kind of interesting. At some point you think, oh, every resume must look the same, and then you realize that people really can have very, very specialized career paths in engineering. There's even within engineering, there's quality engineering, which is more about you think of it typically as testing. I think the industry's gone through a big shift of black box testing, where you don't have to be technical, you just know how to use the product, to white box testing, where you are getting down and testing things at the unit level and the functional level and integration and things like that. So you find people in quality engineering who are super passionate about kind of getting things right and having a great experience for the system being reliable and stable and all of that. CRE is an interesting role that I don't know if a lot of companies have it. I'm starting to see it. It's sort of, at Box, for example, we actually don't have QA at all, and we have engineers who do their own testing. But we have CRE, which is a code reliability engineer, so that person is actually responsible for setting best practices about how do you factor your code to be scalable and modular, maintainable, how do you, what's the right level of testing for the thing that you built? Should it all be unit tests, or should it be integration tests? They just give you a strategy for how to structure things and refactor safely. And so it's a pretty interesting role. So those people, I think, are very interested in the end product being good code quality, as opposed to necessarily thinking about the end product from a user perspective. Localization is another example. If you are a linguist, if you are interested in and fascinated by all of those things, the sort of globalization area, I think, is a really interesting one. I know people who studied things like natural languages and are now figuring out how to implement systems that will automatically translate portions of the user interface, and really interesting problems to solve there. And then getting a little further out of engineering, there's the operations side and even DevOps. So not just the sort of how do we provision the hardware and everything, but how do you actually deploy a service? How do you figure out the securities, the SSL certs that go so that machine to machine can talk to each other? How do you have monitoring? How do you have alerting? How do you have the right kind of just infrastructure to know that your system is going to run well when it's running? So DevOps is about helping you deploy things, and then Ops about keeping it running and maintaining it. So engineering management, pretty obvious, where you are using your technical skills, but you are also using your people skills. It's funny because sometimes I feel like I'm part psychologist and part mom as an engineering manager. So, and some of my most interesting classes in college were public speaking and psychology and things like that. So sociology, like there's a lot that comes in there when you think about organizations and motivations and incentives that get kind of interesting, and yet you can use what you've learned from a technology perspective every day without coding. I don't write any code these days, but people still perceive me as technical because I can get in there and I can spot risks and I can ask about trade-offs, and just having been in the industry and having written code, I know what are the pitfalls people can run into. So program management is, well, let me talk about the other ones for a second. So product management is usually the team of people who are defining the requirements for the product. They're talking to end users and customers and saying, what is it that we need to build that will make them have a good experience? What does the product have to do? And then engineering management is, they work closely with engineering management engineers to sort of translate that and say, okay, well, what does that mean? How are we going to build it? And what's the cost of building it? Is that worth the feature that I'm asking for? Program management, I'm actually missing QA management, so for groups that have QA teams, there's often a QA manager. So program management to me is the sort of the third or fourth leg of the management team. So program management are people who are very organized, thinking about the process, thinking about the development process and the structure of how you're going to get things done and communicating between groups, making sure that things don't drop on the floor. And of course, product management might work closely with product design, so actually doing the user experience and the UI design. And then product marketing is sort of the external facing. They can be helpful both from deciding, like sort of helping you figure out how big is that market. I want to build this product. Is it a $1 million market? Is it a $10 billion market? And how much of that could I ever hope to win? And how do I win it? How do I sell it to people? So they're doing that sort of market assessment, and then they're also helping you at the tail end when you're ready to ship your product to say, how do you talk about it? How do you sell it? Is it a one-to-one sale? Is it online sales only? Is it through a reseller? There's all sorts of ways to get your product sold. So product marketing is both the sort of input of, is it worth building it, and the output of, like, how do you now actually make money? So, so really interesting that I see there's a technical thread through all of these, and all of the people that we have at Box are technical in these roles, but they're obviously not all coding. So, so it's definitely interesting to see where a computer science degree, some of the best product marketers I know have a CS degree, and when you can find them, they are rare. They're awesome, especially if it's a developer product, because they understand, they were developers, so they know how to talk to a developer and say, hey, I know why you should use this tool, and it's better than some other tools. It's pretty cool. Cool. And so, I don't know, this is just a day in the life, how does software get built? I think I sort of talked about it, but the product marketing manager will talk to the product manager, the UX and design people, the engineering manager, and all of these PMs and designers are talking to the engineering, QA, globalization, the SRE is an ops role about deploying your service, and then of course they're all talking to each other, and then they're talking with the NOC, the Network Operations Center, to make sure the service goes down, that the right engineer gets called, even if it's the middle of the night, to go figure out what's going on. Yeah, ops, tech support, and then even tech support is feeding feedback back to product manager and engineering manager about bugs that users are reporting and all of that. So, so really from my original vision of an engineer sitting in a room and coding, that's not how it works. It's always a super collaborative environment, and certainly the companies I've tried to work at have all had that true. I really enjoy that collaborative environment. And like I said, that program manager is like keeping it all together so that things don't get dropped on the floor. Cool. So, so a couple of guiding lights that I think could be helpful as you sort of embark on your careers and figure out what you want to do. The first one, and engineering managers talk about this a lot, is follow what motivates you. It turns out that everybody has super different motivations. Sometimes you find someone who's motivated by money, but usually it's some other kind of motivation. Even if they say they're motivated by money, at the end of the day, it's not a raise or a spot bonus, it's some other like recognition or some other challenge. So for me, I have discovered along my career that I like solving interesting problems, I like having fun and enjoying my team. I start every team meeting with a really bad pun or a joke of some sort, appropriate for 8-year-olds, but they laugh anyway. And then I want to feel like I'm learning and growing. If I get bored, that's just dangerous, and I need to always have some new challenge, something new where I can learn and grow. And then it's also very important for me to have an impact. I realized another reason why I left Adobe was that they're a $5 billion business, and I had an idea that I thought could make us $10 million in revenue. And I thought, oh my God, I had a $10 million idea. Well, it turns out that's not much to a company that's a $5 billion company. So I thought, aha, I have to go to a company where $10 million matters. And so I was really glad to go to Box and do that. So to me, I wanted to feel like I had an impact on where the company was going and how we were shaping things and what we were building, and that was really important to me. So for you, what is it? Is it a challenge? Is it learning and growing? Is it working on something that people can see? Is it working for a company that's successful? Is it your team? Is it your money? Is it having an impact? There's all sorts of different things that can go into to what motivates you, and it's worth looking at that a little bit, because when you come down to a hard choice about should I go to company A or company B, and they're both great offers, and this one has more money and that one's a shorter commute, think at the end of the day to day, what's going to get me to get up in the morning and be like, I can't go to work, I can't wait to go to work today. It's going to be so fun because I'm going to do blah, 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 blah. That's what you should be thinking about is really what's going to motivate you every day. The other thing, I think I said this earlier, leverage your strengths. There's a really cool thing called Strengths Finder, and their whole philosophy is don't worry so much about the weaknesses. We all have weaknesses. I mean, fix the really horrible ones, but for the most part, focus on your strengths and double down on those and take advantage of those because it's more fulfilling and you'll be better at it, right? So, so for me, I'm technical and I like to see systems and how things are interconnected, and a lot of what I do in my free time is reading things that have nothing to do with computer science and programming and technical market, but looking at other things and thinking like, oh, well, that's kind of interesting, and could I apply that, and could I think about that in some other way at work. Communication, I talk a lot, but also I like connecting people and explaining things so that everybody understands what's going on and they have the right context and can make good decisions based on the context that they know. Leadership, positivity, adaptability. I found out that I'm actually really good at being thrown into an ambiguous situation and someone saying, go figure it out. You know, I probably didn't have that in the beginning, but it's something that I've grown over time, and I really enjoy doing that. So I try to leverage those things wherever I go. So what is it about you? What are your strengths? Is it that you love like code quality and getting it just perfect and beautiful looking? Is it about seeing systems, or is it about algorithms? Like if it's algorithms, then maybe you want to be doing something in performance or something like that. Do you like strategy? Is it empathy? Maybe you'd be a good manager. Is it being analytical? Is it UI design? There's so many different things that you can start to explore those things in school, and then think about your hobbies. Often your strengths are the things that you take advantage of in your hobbies as well. So there's lots of ways, and you can even take Strengths Finder online. I think it's free, I'm not sure, but it's a fun way to figure out what your strengths are. And then for your weaknesses, I think it's just enough to handle them, not to like fix them all. So so for mine, I had to ask my husband because you often don't even know what your weaknesses are. But I don't delegate enough. I feel like I should be able to do it all, and I should be able to help everybody. And if I just take all the crap work, then other people can go do the important stuff and whatnot. And I'm finding over time, I had to be reminded that delegation, for me, it might be a terrible task, but for someone else, it might be a learning opportunity. Because even though I've done it 10 times, someone else hasn't ever done it before, and that might be an opportunity for them to grow. So I have to remind myself constantly, delegate, look for delegation opportunities. I also get overcommitted, same reason, if I don't delegate too much to do, and I overcommit. So I found I have to remind myself again, say no. Even though I want to be the good, helpful person and always say yes and be the team player, I have to remind myself. So I've come up with tricks to like convince myself I'm not ever going to be naturally good at it. So how can I find tricks or helpers that will convince me to sort of, I don't know, just reminders to do it. And then I think also I'm too empathetic. I'm probably a little too soft on people, and sometimes I have to have a reminder to say, well, you can't say it in that soft way. Someone's not getting the message. If they're a low performer and they're not doing their job, you can't beat around the bush and have excuses for why things aren't working out and situational. You just have to say, listen, you need to get it together, and here are the reasons why, and let me help you, and let's do it. You've got to be straightforward, and if I'm too empathetic, then sometimes the message doesn't come across, and they don't know what to work on, then I'm not doing them a service either. So again, having what I end up doing is that I can't just fix that, but I can certainly find ways to remind myself to not do it as much as I normally would. So whatever yours are, think about, are they really holding you back and need work? Of course, if you are a communicator where you offend everyone every time you talk, you probably should work on that weakness. But on the other hand, are there ways to work around them or to live with them in some way? So I won't go through what all the possible weaknesses are, but there's some ways to sort of figure out what to do with yours. And then at the end of the day, it's really all about teamwork. So collaboration and communication are key. I really do think that the best course I ever took in college was public speaking. Ultimately, unless you're talking to yourself in the mirror, everything is public speaking. So it's really worth thinking about communication style and maybe even figuring out how to adapt to other people's communication style or translate things that they're saying for other people if it's not making sense. And then skills and teams complement each other, so celebrate differences. You know, I try never to hire a team that's all alike, because then if there's one feature that all of them would gravitate to, like who's going to work on the other 5 features? So you really want to have like an interesting sort of puzzle pieces kind of team where you can fit things together and people complement each other. And in fact, some of the best ideas come out because people have different perspectives and different ways of looking at things. Assume good intentions. This is kind of an interesting one. Early in my career, I was a team lead already on Dreamweaver, and there were a couple new people who joined the team. It was the first new people in like 3 years, and oh my god, I couldn't stand them, and they couldn't stand me, and I get along with everybody, and I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. And I was in the airport, and I saw a book, and it was called "Working with People You Can't Stand." I'm like, okay, so I bought the book, and even though it has a really crazy title, the main point of it was that it's not that people are jerks; it's that they have bad behaviors. And their intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Their intentions are good. It's just you're trying to do this, and they're trying to do this, and you both have annoying behaviors that are just annoying the hell out of each other. So what do? You can go figure out what are their intentions. You've got to assume that they're not just evil people. They really want to do something. If you can help them achieve their intentions, their behaviors just go away. It was magic. I mean, it really was magic. I highly recommend that book. But even today, I just recommend people at least start with, people aren't jerks by nature. They just have something they're trying to do, and they're frustrated, and they're showing a bad behavior from it. So if you can help them and understand their goals and their assumptions and put yourself in their shoes, you get to a much better working place for people. And then I think the last one is learn how and when to compromise. So don't always compromise, but if you, again, like pop back up to the bigger picture and what the shared goals are, you can get to a point where you realize this isn't worth arguing about. I actually feel like this is a lesson from marriage too. Like once you're married and committed, you're like, really? Is this worth arguing about? Because we're going to be married for the next 40, 50 years, so let's not let this one bother us, you know. And I think it's the same kind of thing at work, that you've got to figure out, is it worth standing up and having an argument about this? Does it really matter who's right? Doesn't it matter, like, just pick something that's going to do the job, and it doesn't matter whose solution was more perfect? Or is it something that, like, no, you have to put your foot down and like, no, you have to do it this way because, you know, for some big fundamental reason or whatever. So I think learning how to and when to compromise is a big deal as well for good teamwork. So last slide is really what's next. I think that I guess my internships for sure. It's a great way to explore what the software industry is like. It's a way to explore roles and company culture and really understand, like, you know, what motivates you, what was fun about that internship, what did you learn, what do you want to apply to a full-time job. And honestly, a lot of internships these days, that's like the best job interview a company can ever have. That instead of a 4-hour, like, what do you know and what do you remember from school, it's like 3 months of what would you like to work with and how do you problem solve, what do you do when you get thrown a curveball and stuff like that. So internships are a great way for both the company and you to try each other on for size. Mentorship is also a really great way. I feel like along the course of my journey, I had various formal and informal mentors, but a really great way to see, well, what is that job like, and what do you do there, and how did you learn that, how did you make that jump? And I would say all along my career, just finding people to hear their stories. I love storytelling. I feel like that's a great way to get an idea of kind of what might be next, or open up opportunities, or a new job description, or a new company, or something like that. And then the last one is networking. So keep in touch with people. I really wish I had LinkedIn like when I was in college, because now I'm like dying trying to find people and see where they all went. But yeah, keep in touch with people from college or from your internships or whatever jobs you have, because later on, whether you're an engineer somewhere or you're a hiring manager, you need connections to those great people, either because you want to hire them or they want to hire you, or they might introduce you to a whole new company. So, so I think those are the big 3 things that are really you know, kind of are a great way to get your career started and then keep it kind of flowing and you know, figure out how to navigate from there. So that was all I had. I'm happy to answer questions if folks have any.